So welcome again back to From Dungeons to Starships, and the series of videos that we've been looking at here, talking about oldhammer miniatures that we feel should deserve some love now that Warhammer Fantasy the Old World is back on your tabletops. Now I've run through a series of 5 videos showing off the 5 figures that I and a group of friends believe have been the models that we think deserve the recognition and deserve you to be thinking about during putting together your armies for these miniatures that you're going to use. But as such, I didn't want to see this series of videos as just my own thoughts, and I wanted to gather some people together to give you their thoughts and their ideas on what they believe is their favourite model from the genre. Now what we've got is about half a dozen friends of mine who have been good enough to take some time out to put either a little video together or to give me a list of models that they feel should be put on this list. And therefore we're going to go through, talk about a few of them, but also just let these guys give you their own ideas. Now I gave them free rein when putting together what they thought. So as such, with this oldhammer miniatures, we're not going to be solely pinpointing fantasy miniatures. There is going to be talk about 40k miniatures of the same period in this list, but at the end of the day, it's celebrating the sculpting talent that was around at the time. So let's get into the lists first. And what I'm going to do with these two guys is pull a model off the list that they've supplied me. Now, for technical reasons or timeline reasons, although the guys weren't able to put together a little snippet of video for me, they have supplied me both with lists of models that are their favourites to basically pull off what I think maybe we talk about or highlight a little bit more. So the first person on the list is going to be Mr. Brad Moran. Now, Brad has been part of the podcasting community for games as for many years, and I've listened to him in many guises of different podcasts and different YouTube channels that he's been involved with. At the moment he's running his own channel, being the Cast Ice Podcast, but he's also the official podcast for Warlord Games, and with news of Warlord Games reissuing edition 3 of Bolt Action, I'm sure you want to go to someone who's got their finger on the pulse, and I cannot recommend Brad's channels enough. So Brad was a member of the sales team for Games Workshop, and also has been through many iterations in his own gaming career, being from a meta player in the US community to being more narrative driven now in his later years of gaming, and being involved in very many games. So when I said to him about what figure he would like to champion, he gave me a list of about 3 or 4, and there's one of them that stood out again. Yeah, okay, let's go with that one. Many people remember that back in the day the older editions of White Dwarf contained comic book pages. Now my favourite was Gobbledygook, the Tales of the Comedic Goblin, but a lot of people's favourite was the second one, Thrud the Barbarian, or basically White Dwarf's and Games Workshop take on the character of Conan the Barbarian from the Arnold Schwarzenegger films at the time. As such, this model has gone through many different artistic renditions, and there is a number of sculpts available that depicted this figure actually in metal. Brad's suggestion has been this one, but he's also very keen to say that he owns the full collections of the alternative sculpts that were available around this time. So technically he's putting the image of Thrud the Barbarian in, but with one of these 3 sculpts. Second on my people who have given me a list is the awesome Jordan from Jordan Sorcerer. Now during the episode in this series when we were doing about the Skaven, We highlighted towards you that if you wanted a bit more lore and lore type videos, that you couldn't go far worse than Jordan himself. Now, Jordan, unfortunately, because of his schedule, was not able to put together a little bit of time to produce the video himself as he was like to do. But again, just like Brad, he gave me a list of models to have a look at. And I was quite surprised to find that on that list was a model that I'd never seen before. Now, Jordan points towards some Mordheim roots, and he's identified the sculpting of this model to be down to one or two gentlemen, either Mark Bedford or Daniel Pacey, and is part of the set that was created for the Mordheim game of the Frenzied Mob. So in this set of 12 figures, it was created to add some character to your tabletop during your games of Mordheim, and as such to add some characters of the townspeople or citizens of Mordheim that still might be roaming the streets. So as such, pretty much I think the gloves were off in terms of the design of these figures. And as such, the one that Jordan has championed is this one, Fishhead, who he feels would make a great chaos type cultist within any warband. It could be added to maybe units of flagellants for the Empire, etc, etc. So thanks to those guys for supplying their lists to us. But now we're going to move into the 4 videos I've got for you from various members of the online community, whether they're from content creators themselves through to Golden Demon winning artists, to members of the community I've just known for years and really rely on their solid ideas and their solid thoughts about looking about these types of miniatures. So let's see what they've got to say.
Yeah, alright, Kieran's asked if I can knock a quick video up and speak about some of my favourite oldhammer miniatures from back in the day when we first got in the hobby. For me, that was back in 1988, and I was a tender age of 14 when I first started going into Games Workshop in Newcastle, up here in the northeast of England where I live. Issue 100 was the first White Dwarf I ever got for myself. I think, you know, the range that really got me first excited was the Wood Elves, and I really loved the Wood Elf War Dancers. But then Kieran did a video about Wood Elf War Dancers, so I thought to myself, well, I best do something different. So I racked my mind thinking back to some of those old miniatures back in them days, and you know, loads of little toy soldiers going round and round in my head. And that's how I've come up with this selection. It's not an individual figure, it's not even a range of figures, it's actually the 1988 Citadel catalogue. Now, I'm sure most of you have seen it, or if you haven't, go and check it out, because I'm sure you'll be able to get a PDF. But front cover was the same front cover as the Warhammer First Edition. John Blanche, I'm pretty sure it was. Some form of warrior, not necessarily chaosy, but just a big hard looking bloke with a massive hammer smashing a skeleton to bits. I mean, as a 14-year-old kid, I was sold straight away. But essentially all it was inside, though, it was like a flip chart. It wasn't, I'm sure it didn't open that way. I'm sure it opened like a flip chart. Like it was like gum, you know, the gum seal. You could peel the individual pages out. But it was set up in the same format as GW did their new releases in White Dwarf. So essentially it was just a black and white photograph of the figures, and it was pages after pages after pages. It was Warhammer. It was probably 40k, but you got to think 88, there wasn't as much 40k, so it predominantly would have been all fantasy. There was, but you know what I mean, I can just remember as a 14-year-old kid just first getting into the hobby and just having this resource of basically, this is how I'm going to spend all my money for the rest of my life. It's amazing. If you haven't seen it, as I'm saying, I'm sure most of you probably will have done. I'm certain, in fact, I know, because I was looking at it before you could do this, there is PDFs, you can go and have a look at it. I wish I'd probably looked at it before I did this video, because I probably would have thought about some stuff I'd forgotten about. I mean, just come to mind, I'm thinking of the ogre mercenary captain, you know, resting his hand on the pommel of his ginormous sword stuck in his belt, big fur hat, both looking like an ogre. Stuff like that, just proper genius stuff. Yeah, if you've not seen it, check it out. It's a fantastic resource. I wouldn't mind getting my hands on one again, but as I'm saying, probably few and far between these days, and very dog-eared. I'm sure mine's probably disintegrated. I haven't got it. It's gone. I have no idea. My mother will have thrown it out with all this stuff. But anyway, that's my choice. Enjoy your old hammer gaming in the new old world. Cheers. Catch you later, guys.
So, tasked, you say, with naming my favouriteest old hammer miniature? Well, I say good day, sir. That was like my bread and butter growing up. That was like the bestest period of figures. How can I name my favouriteest when there were so many? You know, you've only got to look at Jez Goodwin. The god of miniature designs, to say any one of these, because they were all fantastic. You know, he like basically envisages the whole of the Eldar line. My personal favourite was, you know, the original Escher. They still stand up even now. Are brilliant models, but when it comes to old hammer, you know, old hammer is old Warhammer stuff. Is it technically Warhammer stuff? Yes, it is. And I think when it comes to my favourite old hammer, you are looking at two breakdowns. You are either looking at the Wood Elves or the Skaven. Again, they might be, Jez Goodwin, yes. But it's those two factions that were definitive of the range. I mean, the Wood Elves were, their aesthetic, they created the whole of the Wood Elf genre in Warhammer. And I think going back to those, it's got to be the classic war dancers. They were all beautiful, the big angular elven faces. But if I'm brutally honest, and I go to my all-time favourite old hammer miniature, this is going to be controversial. Nordoom. I could just leave it at that, and you'll all be like, "What the fuck?" No, it was one of the original Skaven models. It was a grey seer, and he had like the orb in his hand, and he was like, "Ah." I think that just incorporated everything that I wanted from a miniature. It was that whole secretive thing. It was a Skaven, and Skaven were just coming out, and everyone's like, "Skaven, what the fuck?" And it was just that whole, because he was like the prequel to Thanaqual. And I think, as I said, any of the Skaven models were awesome. So that's what I say, and I'm the Battlehammer. Well, I'm Straw, I'm the Battlehammer, and what I say goes.
Hi there, my name is Val from the Square Base Podcast, and I have been asked to share my favorite old hammer miniature here on the channel. So thank you for the opportunity. Although it was a little bit difficult for me, because immediately after watching some of the content, I realized that maybe my tastes weren't quite, let's say, old enough for the channel. In fact, a lot of my tastes are founded on a big transition that happened when I was just starting into the game in the mid-90s. I had actually started in 5th edition Warhammer Fantasy. I'd played Empire, a lot of the classic metal Empire models there, your Talaran crossbowmen, the pewter halberds and swordsmen, and it was great. I really, really loved those guys. But at some point, I think there was a transition in my friend group, and we started getting into 40K. For me, though, the gateway drug to 40K was actually a little Golden Child board game slash, not really board game, I guess, Gorka Morka is what it was. Gorka Morka captured my imagination massively. I'd already been a little bit orc curious, but it was Gorka Morka that really drew me into the greenskins and what they're all about. And specifically, what drew me into them was a design aesthetic brought forward by a sculptor named Brian Nelson. Brian Nelson is the person I think most responsible for, and I'm speaking a little out of turn, so maybe you can correct me in the comments, or perhaps the host can correct the history here. But he does definitely feel like the most influential sculptor as far as really defining the way orcs, both with a C and a K and a URUKS, came to look for GW, giving them somewhat of a much more distinct style and flavor. And the first time I encountered those was in Gorka Morka, of course. So those models, and also thanks to the, let's say, lack of success that Gorka Morka was met by, or at least overproduction of Gorka Morka, there were a ton of these things that were available to me in the shops at a discount at independent retailers. I remember going crazy in a clearance bin, and I was able to pick up a ton of these, pewter miniatures that were both characters and members of the various mobs for Gorka Morka, and those formed the basis of what would become my first 40k army. But this isn't about 40k. We're supposed to be talking about fantasy. And little did I know that actually the first Brian Nelson sculpts were not actually Gorka Morka sculpts, but they were grounded more in the Warhammer Fantasy Battles range. And his first orc sculpts actually came from the Orcs and Goblins range, where he sculpted the recently made to order, or maybe just always available to order, Orc Biggins, which I didn't really know. I actually learned that just before recording this. I thought that was cool, but you can see the evolution of his style there. Those orcs really do, I think, echo what I would call, and don't hate me for saying this, the clown shoes style of orcs up until that point, which really, again, didn't really sing to me. They weren't my first favorite thing. But these orcs, you can see, especially in those big uns, they're kind of both. They're little clown shoes, but now you're starting to see some distinct features in the orcs that I think Brian Nelson would then continue to expand upon. There were a series of character models, his Boar Boy riders, and it's in those characters, I think, hopefully it's old enough for the channel, and I'll provide some other footage of this model for B-roll, but it's from those character models that we get this fella. He was from the Idol of Gork campaign. I believe his name was Nazgrib at the time. He just eventually became known as he's an Orc and Goblin shaman, and I think he really is a great example of all the things I just love about orcs, and specifically the Brian Nelson style of orc, which later on, like I said, informed the design and style of GW orcs, probably to this day, really. But I think you can say that this is still from an era of sort of heroic scale, so-called 28 millimeter heroic scale. And what I've come to feel about heroic scale is that that generally means around a 32 millimeter head and hands on a 28 millimeter body. So you've got these big exaggerated features, things that play well on the tabletop. And then Brian Nelson said, it feels like, no, we're going to go like 40 millimeter head and hands, 20 millimeter body. So you get these really, you would think, cartoony looks from those orcs, but they're not. They are mean-looking creatures. And this guy I really like because obviously this is a battles game. He is looking off into the distance. He is ready with some spells summoned from Gork or possibly Mork, and he's ready to go. But he's kind of given that evil eye stare down out there. Accompanying him, and was almost my number one choice, is actually the Goblin Shaman, which who's holding up a wizard staff, again looking out fiercely into the distance at what's coming at him. So I find that these models are particularly evocative. I'm going to give the edge to the Orc Shaman model, and I just really like him, and I think he is a really great example of everything that I came to love about the look and aesthetics of orcs and actually something that you don't get to do in 40k, just that love for goblins. So Gorka Morka had a lot of grots in it, and it was always disappointing to me that when I switched over to 40k that grots or Gretchen were just sort of a unit. They didn't have as much fleshed out love. But Brian Nelson, in obviously the fantasy range, was able to run amok, creating these really, again, like extremely proportioned little monsters that I just really love. So I've got cabinets full of them, and whenever I can, I'm pulling models from this era, and whenever I can, that Orc Shaman is somewhere in the ranks of my Greenskins army. So thank you once again. I'm Val Heffelfinger. Hope you liked my model pick. Hopefully it's old enough for Oldhammer. Probably qualifies more as, and might even be one of those defining models of Middlehammer. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. This is not a culture I'm super informed on, but I can tell you what I like, and I love those Brian Nelson orcs and that shaman the most. And if you thought I sounded like a nice guy to listen to, please swing on by Squarebase here on YouTube, or also available in podcast format. And we'd be happy to regale you with tales from the old world. We're super into the game, and we've been having a lot of fun interacting with our audience and talking about the return of Warhammer Fantasy. I know for some of us it never went away, but it's really great to see how many new people are coming into the hobby through fantasy, and it's been a great ride so far. So thanks for having me, and I hope you like my pick.
Can you hear the chains calling? Warhammer 40k, Oldhammer! Man, I love this stuff, and you can tell where I'm going already with this. Orcs were what started it all for me. I was a very young lad. I placed myself near 8 years of age, so I was lucky enough. I bypassed all the superheroes and space operas, and it was always 40k for me. Now I'm old. But I enjoy connecting to my past by collecting some of these models recently. I've been going to conventions over the years. I have some of my own collection to rely on, but yeah, I've got them old boys coming together, big wog energy, and all in a tribute to the color scheme I created when I was just a wee grot. But like all orcs, I'm here to find out who is best. And I have to say, it's a model that I don't own. This model is something that I see as a reward for all my hard work. Once I've put all the bricks into my castle, the main gate will be formed by the big boss himself, Gazgul, Mag Uruk Thraka. This side of beef has always remained prominently oversized throughout history, and I cannot wait until future times when Gazgul is even larger than his current iteration. But this classic old model has it all. Gigantic kiss boots, skulls piled on skulls, horns in every direction, unfunctional armor, and much DACA. So one day, my brightly colored path will lead me to the boss man himself. Thanks, Kieran. I'm happy to be included in this video. And hey, everybody, I have a Patreon, and I also am releasing a volume in the Art of series that will be live on Kickstarter soon, and I'll be sure to be including many, many orcs inside, as they are my favorite. Thanks. Wog.
So, favorite Oldhammer, Middlehammer, old school miniatures. I think they're just gonna kind of fall out my face as I remember them. I think big love to my boy Nagash, or Nagash, however you pronounce it. The original metal one is a thing of something. It's a thing of something. Like a couple of years ago, I actually restored the one I had from childhood that was held together with blue tack. Repainted it, resculpted some parts of it. Completely reposed it as much as I could. Did it make it better? Like 5% better. I think on a model like that, it's kind of like diminishing returns, but there is a sense of nostalgia to it, and it's at the end of the day, it's ultimately it's a massive lump of metal, and I think that's quite nostalgic. I think I bought it off a mate for £8 back in the day, which isn't much. And yeah, I think it's the memories that surround it and that are attached to it from that time when I got it You know, staying at my grandma's house. Darren, who lived across the road, who I've never seen since. Yeah, I think it's just kind of like a bit of sad nostalgia that's attached to old Nagash. But also it was nice to you know, dig something out of a box that I had as a kid, did a shit job of making and painting, and to kind of do it now to an okay standard, understanding how these things work better as an adult. It was a nice little full circle thing, so that was nice. I think I also love the way that, you know, when you're younger, you kind of buy into the shill a bit harder. So like, I remember how Nagash looked. I remember how he looked on. I can't remember which. It might have been 3rd edition fantasy, the the rulebook for the undead dudes. Yeah, I remember him looking like a complete fucking boss on the front of that, with like his spooky lantern and shit, and some poison gas going everywhere, and swifting his blade around, and glowing eyes and shit. He looked awesome on that cover. I can't remember the name of the book, or which edition it was, but it was an old one. And somehow in my head I attributed that image of him to how the model looked, which is not how the model looks at all. Yeah, I think Nagash is my favourite. Like, an honourable mention as well for like a 40k unit. Eldar Viper jet bike, that was the coolest shit ever when that came out. And the little jet bikes that came with it, you know, like a squad of 3, I think they were. I used to love those. Eldar jet bikes, very cool. Loved a classic Land Raider. I think I've never owned one, but I prefer the original to the Mark II. Owned a Mark II, didn't own a Mark 1. OG Metal Carnifex, you cannot go wrong with an OG Metal Carnifex. Same with the Hive Tyrant. Metal Dreadnought, Metal Space Marine Dreadnought was, I don't know, it felt like such a flex to have that when I was a kid. Because it was so big, it was so mean, and it was just so stocky. And in hindsight, it's not the most dynamic model ever. But you look at like the Redemptor Dreadnought and shit that comes out now, and it's still the same pose. It's just stood there, squat, braced, ready to go. But for on the Nagash thing, I had an obsession with the undead faction when I was younger. I'll see if I can find it. So when I moved out and did all that teenager stuff, my dad got a hold of my undead, and he was very particular to multi-basing stuff, which is not my favourite thing. But we do have, it's a mix-up. It's mostly a mix. Oh, he loves his gloss varnish as well. I think it's like fucking wood varnish for a fence or something. But the original lineup of, I say original, like the mid-90s, like black and red packaging, skeleton warriors, and they very much look like the Hydra's teeth, the Harryhausen Hydra's teeth skeletons. Yeah, you can't really beat that simplicity. Cavalry, we've got the skeleton cavalry, and a sprue. Still, a sprue has survived. I think they'll keep that as a sprue. I might fucking frame it. I don't think they've ever been topped into. I mean, they have been topped. I don't think they've ever really been beaten in terms of like just the raw fun simplicity of them. Like, you get a box, they're all completely individually posable, with really nice strong ball and socket joints. Yeah, I love them. I think overall, Nagash and those, like that 10-pack of Skeleton Warriors, fuck knows what's happened to that. Like the Skeleton Cavalry. And like Vlad von Karstein, you just can't. That's a fucking big base, Dad. Jesus Christ, you just can't beat that. You cannot beat that. Oh my god, the original black coach. Shit the bed. Might have to do something with that. Aha! I'm not getting that out. That's the biggest base in the world. Jesus Christ, Dad. Yeah, Nagash, original Skeleton Warriors, those are my favourite miniatures, and I hope, well, I mean, I've done Nagash. I hope to one day touch on this box and do something interesting with it, I think. Yeah.
So my thanks goes out to not only the guys who have taken the time to aid in putting this little video together, but also you guys for taking the time out to watch it. It makes a lot of difference to know that there is people out there who are enjoying the stuff that I'm doing on this channel, and it makes me want to go and continue to make more content for you. But what I'd like to hear is your suggestions going forwards. Is there something you feel that you would like to see from us here on From Dungeons to Starships? Would you like us to continue going on this list, looking back, different games, different models, etc., etc.? Have you enjoyed the little series, or would you like videos that are more encompassing and keep the topic all in one place? Again, we cannot grow as a channel without you being around. So thank you for being around, and thank you for all of your comments. And again, as usual, I hope your dice treat you well in your games from Dungeons to Starships.